I don't really think that, at least the people who I've encountered, or I read about or personally know, who were raised Orthodox and then gave up in their orthodoxy, it may be that they'll become totally non-observant of certain ritual laws, or less observant or more lax in certain observance of ritual laws. But overall, I don't think that, for the most part, that has had a negative impact on their ethical and moral values. They may still find the moral and ethical values of Judaism that they consider to be positive, to be compelling, and they'll, continue to live with it. Also, we do find in the Orthodox world some people, like, people just in the news most recently, obviously, you don't have to go mentioning names, who are part and parcel of the Orthodox world and engage in extremely immoral or unethical behaviors. So even though overall the people whom I know in the communities I've lived in have been, basically ethical and moral, and a lot of that is coming from the traditions in which they were raised, including myself. I mean, to the extent that I'm ethical and moral, I don't want to present myself as any tzaddik by any means, but to the extent that I'm ethical and moral, a lot of it still comes from the teachings of orthodoxy. My first two books are exactly about that. The first two books, The Seven Deadly Sins and Wounds Not Healed by Time, are both trying to make the case that there's so much richness of psychological insight and wisdom and value, moral and ethical value, in religious traditions, Judaism, but also Christianity, I look at, that is of use and value to people, even if they don't accept the theological or the dogmatic religious doctrines in which these teachings have been embedded. So I teach courses, for example, on Sifrat HaMusar, Jewish ethical and devotional literature. Now, without claiming that one can learn a lot about, let's say, envy or anger or greed and how to control these things, even if one doesn't necessarily buy into the assumption that what it says, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not murder, that these were divinely revealed. There's just wisdom in religious traditions that is applicable outside of the theological context in which they're typically embedded in the religious literature. It might weaken to some extent the force or the power. To get back to the question you asked earlier about how important is the belief in a transcendent being for one's being moral. But overall, I don't think that anybody is going to read my book if they will say, Schimmel has a point here, and maybe I really have to reassess my belief in the Torah being revealed to Moses at Sinai, that's going to make them unethical or immoral.
Do you ever doubt your skepticism?
Excuse me? Do
you ever doubt your skepticism?
Do I ever doubt my skepticism? To the extent that I am aware of the fact that, like any other human being, I have my reasoning powers are limited, or I hope I have some intellectual modesty or humility, realizing that I can err, absolutely. Do I doubt my skepticism with respect to the specific issues that I address in the book? Yes. Not really, to tell you the truth. I mean, remember, I'm 67 years old. My skepticism started my doubting started when I was a teenager. Kind of came into full force when I was around 23. So it's been like 40 years that I've been thinking about this, and nothing I've come across in the 40 years, and I'm involved in Jewish studies, and I'm involved to a large extent in teaching traditional literature from within the world of Jewish orthodoxy and Jewish tradition, which I love to teach. But there's no compelling argument I found in the 44 years since I was 23 that has made me reconsider that maybe my views about this, which are really not based on me, they're based upon the hundreds of scholars and scientists, etc., who have made these claims over the last 200 years. No, I'm not really doubtful. I don't really have any sense that at a cognitive level I would return to my early belief system. But I do point out in the book again, a lot of what we believe is based upon emotions, and I'm sure it's in my case the same thing as well. So I could imagine myself being under certain life circumstances or situations that might happen in the future, becoming about teshuvah and reverting back maybe to my early orthodoxy and doing the same kind of things that I did when I was young and that people still do today to compartmentalize their cognitive from their emotional. So that might happen, but I don't really have any, rational cognitive grounds so far to doubt my skepticism vis-a-vis the Torah Sinai. doctrine.
Yes. Have you ever had the sense in the last 44 years that God was talking to you through the text?
Actually, 44 years, that's right. I said I'm 67, 23, right, 44 years. No, not really. No. Once I became an apikoris, so to speak, and began to look at this literature, the way, I remember, for example, when I first came in, I think it was like 25 or 26, after I had gone through this, crisis of faith and really felt that I no longer could believe traditional Orthodox doctrines and dogmas. So I came across, I think I was asked to teach, I was teaching some Hebrew school in Detroit, and I was asked to teach a course on contemporary Jewish thinkers. So I read some excerpts from Mordechai Kaplan's, classical work on Reconstructionism, Judaism as a civilization, and I said, oh my gosh, you mean to tell me that this guy was having all the same thoughts and grappling with the same issues in 1920 that I was doing in 1960? It was like, I realized in a certain sense I was just, reinventing the wheel or rediscovering the wheel. This has been something that ever since the Haskalah, thousands of Jews have gone through what I went through. There's nothing unique about my becoming a heretic, a kodesh, or whatever term you want to use. And that, so people like Kaplan, I said, wow. And I so much identified with the struggle that he went through and with the way in which he was analyzing and reflecting upon the Jewish tradition. So he uses the term godliness. He doesn't believe in a personal God, Kaplan. He uses godliness. But when he reads these texts, I don't know that he sees God speaking through them, except insofar as he would say, to the extent that these texts contribute to the betterment of mankind, as he would understand that, however he would understand that. So God speaks in that way through the text, but I don't tend to use that language of God speaking to me through the text. I think the texts are man's search for God, man's search for meaning, for purpose, for trying to explain why the people of Israel are, or the Jewish people are where they are, what they're doing, what's their purpose. And in that ongoing and dynamic grappling with the meaning of Jewish existence and with general questions of why is there a world, what's the purpose of all this, why am I in this world, the Jewish thinkers, hundreds of thousands of Jewish thinkers over the ages, came up with some very powerful, wise, psychological and moral insights. But I don't necessarily use the term. It's God speaking through them. They are speaking to me through their grappling with God questions.
Got it. What have been the consequences to you in the Orthodox community of your heretical outlook? Is it widely known? Do they refuse to give you an aliyah? What happens?
Okay, whether it's widely known or not, I don't know. I've been living in one community for, let's say, I moved to the Boston area in 1972 or something like that. So I've been living in Newton Center since 1973. Ever since I was teaching in the academic setting, I mean, this was the way in which I taught Judaism, and so I wasn't hiding any of my views. And I've published articles in the past where it's clear from anybody who can read with a discerning eye that, I'm not a traditional Orthodox believer. In the particular, and then of course this book, however, is obviously, hopefully, maybe because of your help as well. Look, I know a lot of people read your blog and your website is fascinating. So maybe more people will read my book, also as a result of our interview today. But I belong to an Orthodox synagogue in Newton Center called Sha'arei Tefillah, which is a liberal modern Orthodox synagogue. I have publicized my book on the website. Several people in the shul thanked me for writing the book, have bought the book, or discussing the book. We just had a shul-sponsored adult education event where authors from the shul has a lot of people who wrote books, kind of spoke about their books and presented their books to members of the congregation. My books were there, so and my book on the jacket cover says that I gave up my beliefs in orthodoxy, but yet I got an aliyah a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually reflecting on that. That this shul, is very open and liberal in that way, and I'll give you a caveat to that too in a moment.